My name is Terrie Simmons-Ehrhardt, and I'll be presenting a workshop on Meshlab for Virtual Osteology for the Virtual Osteology Conference 2021, hosted by BioantTalks. I've made multiple videos to make it easier for you to watch the most relevant videos for your work and for your level of experience with Meshlab. Please read the descriptions for each video to find links to additional information. This first video covers Meshlab navigation and visualization basics, including simple measurement tools. I'm using version 2020.07. You can download one of the more recent releases if you want from the GitHub page, but this is what I'm using right now. To open models, 3D models, you can either go to File, Import Mesh, and then navigate to your folder to bring the models in. Or you can just drag and drop the way I did to bring the models in. And you noticed a couple of things whenever I brought the models in. There's a trackball here in the middle. To move the model around is just a left click. Mesh Mixer is a right click, so it's a little different if you're used to using Mesh Mixer. This trackball we can get rid of by going to the View menu, Show Trackball. We can get rid of that if you don't like it. Another thing you'll notice is that this layer dialog on the right-hand side popped up as soon as I dropped the models in. In some of the older versions of Meshlab, this does not pop up automatically, so you can enable that just by clicking this little button here. If you hover over it, it says Show Layer Dialog. So this shows the names of your models, all of your layers. They basically work in layers. You'll notice the little eye here, which is toggling the visibility. These two models are generated from the same CT scan, so they're in exactly the same position. So it's a little difficult to tell which one is which, but we'll go through that. You'll notice when I select a model that it gets highlighted in yellow, and that's really important if you're performing different functions in Meshlab to make sure that the model you actually want to perform the function on is selected. So that's the yellow kind of stands out, so just double check that. You'll also notice these little buttons next to each model. So the first one, pretty much anything in Meshlab, by the way, if you hover over it, it gives you the name or even a little description of what that button does. So same here, this is a bounding box around your model, and you can enable it for one model separately from the others if you want. The second button enables point view. Let me make this model invisible. There we go. So this is showing you the vertices, and you'll notice that this default color is green and they're just a little flat square pixel. If we go down here to the bottom, we can actually customize the appearance of the points. So we can change the color by double-clicking this color tile if you want to yellow or blue. We can also use the dot decorator to make it look more like a little sphere. And you can adjust the size too. You'll also notice that we have the solid mesh view enabled as well as the point cloud view enabled at the same time. So you can have more than one of these visualization functions enabled at the same time. I just turned on the wireframe view. And again, we can go down here and we can change the color of these edges if we want. The default color is this light gray. Again, double click. We can make it yellow if we want it. If we turn off the solid mesh view, then now we have, ooh, that looks terrible. Let's go back to like white wireframe. We can turn off the points. We can change the shading. So this still has the white wireframe, but with the vertex shading, so it looks a little nicer if you need to look inside, especially if you're doing some editing and need to remove some little pieces. Then the wireframe view is kind of nice to be able to go in and do that. if needed. Another thing you'll notice is this information panel here at the bottom, and this gives you information about the model that is selected in the layer dialog. So down here you see the name of the current mesh, the number of vertices, and the number of faces. If I had anything selected, then it would also show that. Another thing that's important to notice is the FOV here, which is set to 60, the field of view. I like to switch this to orthographic view. So if you hold the Shift key and scroll your mouse wheel down until this number goes to ortho, then you can see what a huge difference we have in our skull. The default is 60, and then if we scroll down to orthographic. So I like to do this if you're going to do some comparative screenshots. It's a little more natural looking to me. Also, if you're planning to collect any measurements in here with the ruler or with the point picker, then the orthographic view gives you a better visualization of your model in order to identify parts. Just like with the trackball, if you want to collect some snapshots, then we can make that info bar go away under View, Show Info Panel, and just make it go away. And then you can get a little more room to zoom your model. Zooming, you can zoom with the mouse wheel. You can also hold Shift and drag, left click and drag. That does some zooming too. If you need a little finer zoom than whatever the mouse wheel gives you. How do you collect a snapshot? If you want one, it's this little camera button right here, snapshot. Click the three little buttons when this for output folder and select where you want it to go. You'll notice there's a default name of snapshot here, but if you're collecting a bunch of screenshots in one session, there is a counter, so you just have to pay attention to the counter. It should count up within one session, so you're not overwriting previous snapshots, which can happen sometimes. You now have the option to select the background if you want to leave the Meshlab gradient, or if you want to make it transparent, solid white, or solid black. So I'll do one real quick, alpha transparent, and we'll just leave that set to snapshot. Click save. You see that little flash. You don't always see the little flash, but sometimes you do. And let's see. I think I had one in here, so it overwrote it. But there you go. That's the transparent. So if you open this up in a photo editor for making figures, it'll show that background as transparent. A couple of other visualization tools come in handy, especially if you're comparing models. Like I mentioned earlier, these two models come from the same CT scan. They were just produced with different reconstruction algorithms. And so you might, if you're doing some smoothing or decimating or using different software or different reconstruction algorithms, then you might want to have a side-by-side of your models. And so we can actually split this project window under Windows, Split Current View, and I'm going to split it vertically. And let's get things set up. So I'm going to make one model visible over here. I need to get my info panel back so I know which is which. There we go. Notice that the window that is selected has the highlighted purple info panel. So I'm going to make the optimal model invisible there. And I'm going to click in the second window. It's active now, and I'm going to make the second model visible there. Get rid of that trackball again. Because these are in the same position and the same space, coming from the same CT scan, we can actually link the windows. Go under Windows, Link Viewers. Of course, they shifted out of orthographic, so I'm going to shift it back. And you'll see that they're both changing at the same time. They're both moving at the same time, so you can take snapshots of these models in exactly the same orientation with exactly the same settings for comparison purposes. Another thing I want to point out is the default shading in Meshlab is set to vertex shading, and you'll notice how you don't really see very much difference between these two models. But if we switch to face shading, and I'll do that for the second model as well, switch to face shading, then we see a much bigger difference in these two. So be aware of that. A lot of times I think CT software will use vertex shading so things look really smooth and pretty, and then you bring it into Meshlab and you're like, wait a second, that doesn't look quite so nice. So we can see in this second model that it looks like we have larger triangles, and we can actually enable the wireframe view and see that. Just clicking between the windows here. Let's change that wireframe color back to black. Oh, that came out too dark. And now we can actually compare the sizes of the triangles. You can see in the first model the triangles are much smaller, and in areas where you see ridges and flattening in the second model, we have much larger triangles. So that's contributing to the differences between these two models. So Meshlab does have a point picking tool, and it's this PP up here on the toolbar. If we click on that, then a new window pops up that gives us some options for placing points and moving points. I don't really like this. I would rather use something like 3D Slicer for collecting landmarks, but if you just need to collect a couple, then it might be convenient for you to do. And so it's just a right click on the model, and you'll see that it automatically sticks sort of a little pin on it that's pointing in the direction of the normal, and it starts numbering from 0. But we can rename this if we want to call that Bregma by, if you just double click on the 0, or you can click on this rename point button and the same thing pops up. One thing I don't like is that you can't move your model around to get to the next landmark, so you have to close out of the pick point, and then we can go here, get it repositioned to where we want to find another landmark, and then we can right click again to add a new point. And again, it started, our first point is still there because we haven't closed out of the session, it's still open, so the point is still there. But it did start numbering again from 0. Just enter the new name. So if we want to save these points, we can click the Save button and just save this somewhere. You'll see that the file extension is a .pp, but you can just open that in a text editor, and you can also load it into Meshlab. If you plan on collecting the same landmarks for multiple models, then you could save this as a template, which is pretty nice. So basically it won't save coordinate values, it'll just save the landmark names. So we can click Save on that. And you see the file extension is .pptpl. Again, that's text readable, so I'll just save that. Yes. So just to show you that, I will clear all of these points. So let's just clear. I'm going to hit clear, so that'll clear everything. It will clear the template as well as all the points. And then I'll click Load Template and show you what that does. So you can see it has the landmark names, but with no coordinates. So then you can pick, if I want to select Nasion, then I can go ahead and do that. So, and then you could move the skull around and go up and pick Bregma. So the point picking tool is not great, but one thing that is cool, if you've collected landmarks in some other software, then if you can get those coordinates into a text file, then you can open them in Meshlab and visualize them on top of your 3D model. So for me, that's one of the cool things about Meshlab, is that you can sort of overlay all these different all of this different information. So you can have point clouds and wireframes and meshes and kind of all overlaid onto each other. So this is the same skull that I've been using, and I'm going to drop in some landmarks. And let me open that for you in a text editor. So all I did was take the XYZ coordinates and I pasted them into a text editor, and it's saved as a .xyz extension. So it's very simple, and let me show you what that looks like. So the default rendering for just the very simple point cloud, basically, of my landmarks is little tiny pixels. But remember that we can go down here to the layer dialog and let's click on the little point cloud button, and we can either increase the size of the points, or we can use the dot decorator so that they can be visualized as little spheres, and I can change the color. I'm going to change them to something bright, maybe this hot pink. Ooh. We can keep increasing the size of that. And so we can see the landmarks right on top of the skull. So this is pretty cool, especially if you're, if you have a bunch of points or you're comparing models, if you wanted to do, the split view with different models, or just kind of check your points, then I think this is a pretty cool way of being able to do that. And let me just toggle the model off so you can see the points too. Another option that might be useful for doing some quick landmark picking rather than the point picking tool, because it can be a little buggy and crashy, is using that Get Info button right here. It's the eye with the yellow circle around it. And you just click on that and click on your model. And the first thing it gives you is information about a face of your model. But if you want a vertex information, then you can click T and then click on your model, and it gives you the vertex index, the XYZ coordinates. If we click P after selecting a vertex, then that information gets logged into the text output down here on the bottom right. So that might actually be a quicker way for you to collect a few landmarks if you needed, again, not too many, but just a few, especially if you wanted to do some calculations based on a specific landmark, then you could do that pretty quickly, and that would be much easier because, again, then you can just copy this information. It doesn't give you the option to name your landmark, but you can do that if you need to put that information into a text editor or a spreadsheet. Sometimes you might want to use the ruler tool, which is this little measuring tape up here on the toolbar. If we click it, then you see that the cursor's changed to look like a little crosshairs, and then we have this little info box on the top left that says point-to-point measure. So I'm just gonna do a quick measure here of like orbital breadth. You'll notice that the measurement has popped up in two places. It's in our information box on the top left corner. It's also been dropped into the text output in the bottom right. So if we click P after collecting our ruler measurement, then you'll see that not only the distance gets dropped into this text box in the bottom right, but it also gives you the coordinates for point A and point B. So that's pretty nice. And the cursor's still ready, so we can do another measurement. So orbital height is perpendicular to orbital breadth, so it's nice to be able to see orbital breadth there and sort of approximating it. Same thing, I can click P, and you'll notice that the measurements are getting numbered. If you're doing more than one measurement in a session, they start getting numbered from 0 So the first one is M0, the second one is M1, but again, you have the landmark coordinates spit out, and you could just keep on going if you wanted. You just kind of keep dropping. M2 now. P. And the coordinates and the distances keep getting dropped in there. Once you click the ruler tool again, your little lines, your little ruler measures disappear, but the data is still here in the text output for you to copy and paste out into Excel or a text editor if you wanted.